everyone. Welcome back to But Why Tho, the podcast. And today we have a special episode where we're going to sit down with Ryan Schapals, the creative director of Guildhall Studios. I am Kate, and I'm here with Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
And Matt.
Hello.
And Ryan.
That's me.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for making time to have me on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming. To kind of preface this, we all covered PAX South 2019, or 2020. We're in 2020, oh dear. PAX South 2020, one of the last conventions to go on. And we got to play Sea of Legends. More specifically, Matt and Adrian set an appointment to play Sea of Legends, and then the last day was like, yo, all group of friends, come play this game, it's amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. That was like, oh, okay, we've done something right if you guys come back for more. That was so much fun.
Yeah. Yes, thank you again.
If only you didn't have to fly across the country, we could have seen who won that one.
Right?
And the first question I wanted to ask specifically was how you all got started in the development of Sea of Legends and kind of like where the inspiration for it came from, but more specifically, why a tabletop?
Okay, so that's almost two separate questions. So I'll take those one at a time, right? It's like, so how did Sea of Legends begin, and why tabletop? So I will now be speaking, I guess, also for Zach and Jordan, who are not there. So Zach and Jordan Wiseman, by the way, for folks listening at home, these are my business partners, and they are the co-designers of this game, Sea of Legends. So I'm going to attempt to accurately represent all their thoughts and feelings, but we'll see how it goes. The gist of it, though, was pretty simple. It came down to a couple different things. One being that on a personal level, Zach and Jordan were just like kind of missing sort of classic piratey, fantastic adventures. You know, there hasn't been a lot going on since Pirates of the Caribbean came and went. Also some of the more like classic Errol Flynn films like Captain Blood. There used to be like a whole huge genre back in the day of pirate films. And as well, though, they last year, well, we had this big snowstorm basically in Seattle, and so they were stuck inside for a long time playing all these board games that they had purchased and kickstarted and hadn't gotten around to playing yet. And one of those games was Western Legends, which is this sandbox board game where a lot of initial inspiration came from. The idea of like, hey, you are going to be a cowboy and you can do whatever the heck you want. That seemed like a great concept to move over to pirates, because like the core, like no one wants to be a real pirate. Okay, we should make that clear. Like being a real pirate, you're dirty, you're gross. You're probably
scurvy and
scurvy,
amputations.
Exactly, and you're probably like a pretty unpleasant person. Your life is probably very short, and the things you're doing are pretty unsavory to survive. But the fantasy of being a pirate, of getting to run your ship your own way, to live by your own code, to do things you see fit on your own terms, that's what we really enjoy about pirates, and that's what we're trying to capture with Sea of Legends. And so in part, the reason we went with a board game is because that was part of the initial inspiration, but also I think it just goes to like our shared history. So like, for example, Jordan, he's been around and he's been making tabletop games since before either Zach and I were born. And he got to start working with this company called FASA, where he developed a game called BattleTech, which has now been in run for over 30 years now. It's strategic mech warfare in the 31st century and beyond. And as well, also a little game called Shadowrun, which is a pen and paper RPG that was sort of a cyberpunk setting.
Oh, wow.
We have orcs and elves, yeah, but also guns and implants. And so, like, I think that's always been percolating. And then same for Zach. He actually started over at Harebrained Schemes, working as a designer on Shadowrun Returns and Golem Arcana, which was the first game that I ever got to work on as well. And so, like, we're also, like, all three of us are sort of intertwined by working on a game called Golem Arcana, which was a tactical strategy board game that utilized an app, so you could track everything you were doing. You'd have this little stylus and be like, all right, I'm going to tap on this space on the board, and okay, it's going to tell me it's defense, and I'm going to move here. And so this idea of working on tabletop games that integrate new technology has sort of been a part of like how we've all worked together in the past, and it's something that's still, I think, really exciting because it's still like wide open, and so we're trying to do something new, and this felt like the way to do it is a board game, but also an app as well.
And that's something that I thought was really interesting that I know Matt brought up when he first started talking about like why we needed to come play it, because I am a big I like books and paper and physical things, and Matt was like, no, it has an app and it's cool, just wait. How did you all design that app? And were you, because I know you mentioned like doing something that is both, did you have in mind the types of different audiences that you could reach by integrating those things?
Yeah, well, so I think like on the audience end, what's really cool about like a game like this that's a hybrid is I think it has appeal to people who are, if you're into role-playing games, like you can get into the role-play aspect of Sea of Legends. You can really decide what kind of captain you're going to be. Am I a cutthroat? Am I a rogue with a heart of gold? And then go from there. Also, I think like for people who are more used to playing video games, I think the app sort of eases the transition into the analog world of dice and paper and cardboard. And sort of simplifies the process of like having these complex storylines, which generally if you ever try out like a choose your own adventure game, there's lots of good ones out there. Like we were inspired by Above and Below, this War of Mine, the board game, but they have these big books that you have to like navigate through, and it can be very time consuming and clumsy, cumbersome, I would say. And so the app has a way to reduce some of that friction, some of that difficulty of getting into a choose your own adventure style game. And then as well, I think there's just a lot of appeal for people who want to play a board game with big, pretty miniatures. I mean, it was that simple. We're like, we like big, pretty things or scary looking things. Like that was just a core part of the design idea. Like the first time I saw this great game called Rising Sun, it has all these awesome Japanese inspired oni that you can also sort of leverage, and I just was like, I need to own this game, even if I don't ever play it, even if I don't ever figure out how to play it. But I did, and it was an awesome game. But it was the minis that really like sucked me in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think when we did our kind of like our review for But Why Tho, I couldn't figure out. So someone asked me like, what is Sea of Legends? I would have to call it multiple different games like I did in our review. So I feel like I get like the Warhammer vibes because you got these really, really, really intricate miniatures. You got like the D&D role playing stuff. You have like the dice throw mechanics, like dice thrown, and you even have like resource management, like settlers and deck building. You have all this stuff. So if someone were to ask you, Ryan, what is your game most like? If you needed to like hook somebody into the game, because if someone was like, what is when people ask me what is Secret Hitler like? Very ominous sounding game, but I'm like, oh, it's like werewolves, and people are like, oh, okay, I can do that. But what is like Sea of Legends closest counterpart? Because I can never think of what it is, and I imagine you have much more depth in the tabletop world.
That's a really good question. So first of all, I think it might depend on who I'm talking to. If I can cheat a little bit here. So like if I knew, Adrian, I'm like, you're super into playing video games, I might say it's like Sea of Thieves, the board game.
Yes.
Because I think that would be the comparison point.
That is what Matt said. He just said it was like Sea of Thieves, but on tabletop.
Yes, exactly. And if I knew, I was like, okay, Kate, I know you're super into board games. So I'd be like, well, it's kind of like if you brought, if you stuck Above and Below and Western Legends together, that would be Sea of Legends. And so those would be sort of my sort of core reference points, because it is hard to boil down. Like when I do try to boil it down, I'm like, well, it's a pirate-themed, narrative-driven sandbox board game. And that doesn't necessarily clear anything up.
Yeah, I think for me, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come back and play it, because I was like, I'd never played anything like this that has so many different game elements in it. But at its heart, you can screw over your friends, and it's really competitive. But you have all these cool story elements where you can role play as female pirates and make them sound very not how they look on their pictures.
Yes. Yes. And I think I only sort of half answered your question, Kate. So I was just going to try to finish, though, but the sort of the two parts of your question there. How did we come up with the app? I don't think I really touched on that, but basically it started as a much different idea for an entirely different game, um, way down the line. But basically, we realized it had this huge potential to tell stories, and so basically we adapted a pre-existing piece of software and rebuilt it and reformed it for our purposes. And we are very lucky to work with some really awesome developers over in Canada, north of us in Vancouver at Finger Food. And they really helped us put it together and deliver everything that we wanted. Where we are like, hey, I want to, make sure that the app knows which lovers and nemesis are in play. That was the kind of thing that we built the app for.
Awesome. I know the app for me was great just because, as we talked about, like, as you go farther on in the game, I talked about, like, I'm not a fan of having all the books and papers, and then by, like, turn 70, I'm like, this is a chore just to roll dice and figure out what everything is anymore, so having the app was nice. But also, I guess, going into, like, the narrative stuff, like, obviously we have its pirates, but you all, I believe, selected a certain region to try to have your pirates and kind of based with some nice lore and everything. I don't know if you want to get into that now.
Sure, yeah, like the setting itself. So for Sea of Legends, it's set in the Caribbean, but it is a bit of an alternate history. There's some magic, and there are myths that come to life. So while the colonial forces and occupying groups are there, like you've got the Spanish and the English playing a predominant role, we also have different factions that represent different powers. And different mythologies and different sort of worldviews as well. So like that means we can have actually we have a really awesome return for the Aztec Empire where Quetzalcoatl is leading these sort of guardian statues to rebuild the Lost Empire. Or we have the Children of Tlaloc, who are also Aztec inspired, and they are sort of this lost hidden civilization. We have Atlantis returning to the surface. We've got zombie conquistadors. We've got some indigenous folklore inspiring this creature called the Stikini, which is a witch who vomits out her organs and becomes this sort of harpy-like owl beast. So yes, there is all sorts of things you have not seen from a typical pirate game, because we like cool creatures.
So all I'm hearing is that we need to have Sea of Legends, but the video game here pretty soon, because all of that sounds amazing, and put me in that world.
Oh my gosh, I would love to. Yes, all we need to do is just sell all the copies of the game, and then we can do whatever we want.
Hashtag Team Merfolk. Sort of put that out there. Because I just to build on Matt's question and from the way you explained it too, is like, I think that it's really interesting because I can't think of many other games that are in the Caribbean, or more specifically with that like South American, Mesoamerican like foundation. What types of research did you all put into building out these myths, obviously adapting them to a new narrative and to a new game?
Yeah, so the thing is like so it's like we wanted to include these myths and these stories because we definitely see them being underrepresented in media as a whole, not just in games. But that does require you need to know what you're talking about. So there's a couple of ways that we sort of attack this. Basically, on our own, we tried to do our own research, our own internet sleuthing, but we knew that we could have blind spots where we might miss stuff. So what was really helpful, though, was to work with folks who have already worked in these sort of spaces. So bringing on, we were really lucky to work with some really awesome folks who just do like sensitivity readings and just focus on like cultural research, and they work with game companies to be like, hey, no, you're completely misinterpreting this. And also they've been able to connect us with other writers where we've got to work with this really awesome writer who her specialization was in for a while in Aztec myth. And she I remember when I first started talking to her, she was like, oh yeah, I wrote this article 10 years ago for Strange Horizons about like how sacrifice is actually used in Aztec culture and like ways it is it is mistaken in popular media. And I was like, okay, then you're someone we need to work with.
That's amazing.
And so that's what it really comes down to, is like we, Zach and I and Jordan, we try to do what we can, but at the end of the day, you need to find people who really know this space and can represent it appropriately. And so we've really worked on building a writing team that can handle a bunch of different histories and mythologies.
So I guess, like, going into the narrative, we've been talking about why thing, but I guess why was it integral for you all to make sure you had this narrative and I guess these themes in the game, if that makes sense?
Like, okay, to even back up a step further, like, why narrative at all? Or
why narrative at all? Because obviously we said this was kind of a sandbox. It was pirates. You can do kind of whatever you like, be whatever type of pirate you like, but you wanted to make sure that the narrative aspect was in there. And then obviously you all have done quite a bit of research, it seems like, to make sure all this stuff was correct. But I was just wondering, like, in a sandbox type game where you kind of allow the player to do what they like, why'd you want to make sure to have this part in there?
Well, I think I think on a personal level, it's just like, this is the kind of game we wanted to see and play. Like truthfully, I think that's where it starts. You're like, well, I love story elements in games. I love storytelling games, and I love games that make storytelling more approachable. Like, in some ways, I think a traditional RPG can be really intimidating, but this can potentially be a game for people who want to experience something similar, but don't want to get that far into the deep end. On the other hand, like, despite my personal biases, we built the game from the ground up to support players who are not interested in the story aspects. So you can, if you choose, you break my heart, but you could skip all the narrative content and play it as like a minis and card game if you want. But we think what is really going to stick with people, then the idea is like both the stories they're experiencing, but really the larger narrative that's created, this sort of emergent narrative of you playing through the stories and interacting with the other players. And you're like, oh, well, you were being chased by hordes of the undead. I was busy making, an alliance with the merfolk. And then, Kate stole my key item that said that we were best friends with merfolk. And then all of a sudden she won the game. Like, that's the kind of the sort of stories I want players to come away with when they're done. And I just think it wouldn't be the same without that narrative context to give names and feelings to the places you're exploring.
And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed when in our playthrough was the mechanic of having both a villain for yourself individually as well as a romance option. Because I'm not going to lie, and I don't know if it's a stereotype, but I love romance games. I love romancing people. It is so fun. So when I saw that was in there, I was like, oh, that's really cool. But then at the same time, I can't just go all, I have to balance it. Or I wanted to balance it between the villain and the romance. And when you all were building out those narrative steps and those narrative choices, how hard was that to integrate that? Because it's not just me going on a side quest or a main quest. I can also go and woo somebody, and I can also try to vanquish my enemy. Those are a lot of narrative threads to kind of follow.
Yes, I would say we had to make a lot of mistakes to find the right balance. Truthfully, there was just a lot of trial and error, and we figured out some methods where we can be like, well, we were able to kind of do some fun, easy things to be like, hey, we know that actually of all the nemesis in the game, there are 4 different types of nemesis, and so we can say there's a thief, a noble, a barfly, and a brute, and we'll say, okay, these are our 4 rough archetypes, and so we know they're gonna go to these types of adventures, and they have these kind of things to offer, and then we can sort of further personalize them along the way with some of the technology in the app. But then on a more general sense, it from a game balance perspective, well, we had to just figure out, well, if a adventure gives you 3 points of notoriety, does that make it just better than everything or worse than everything? And so it was really, at the end of the day, we would play test and we would be like, okay, we're gonna log every single type of action that players take during the game, and then we're gonna see how that correlates with winning. And so we would see like, oh no, adventures aren't giving enough rewards. They're not giving enough gold. They're not giving enough items. So even if they are giving the same amount of notoriety as other types of actions, like they still could be leaving the player behind in other ways. And so that was the sort of kind of tracking we had to do to tune that and make sure that it was actually worth your time.
That's awesome. I think the other thing too that I have to ask, because some of the pirates were insanely attractive. What went into designing? Because we've talked about some of the creatures, but what went into designing the character cards and just how the pirates themselves look? Because they each have very different and distinct personalities, just from when you look at their costuming and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think in part, like yourself, I had a real desire to romance all the characters in our game. So that's where it comes from. I think the more I worked on this game, the more I wanted it to be a pirate dating simulator.
Yes!
But on top of that, like, we knew going into it like that the characters would either be, most characters would either become a lover or nemesis. They're two-sided, and so we wanted them to be attractive in different ways, and we wanted them to be hopefully exciting options for all the players. But like when it comes to like the design, like we would have some ideas for like, these are key things like Axe Fist, he's got an axe for a hand. Pretty simple, but then the artist really like takes that and runs with it. So we try to give them just enough information to sort of get the artist going. Like Jocelyn Millet is our lead artist, and he's done really amazing work to like just take all of our ideas and make them way cooler and way more stylish and way more sexy than we ever imagined.
That's awesome. I just loved those arms. I don't remember what her name was, but
she
had
Clara the Smith.
She had amazing arms. Those are goals.
Yes, she's got real guns, and like that was the thing too, is like we just like wanted to play a little bit with like the traditional notions of like, well, who's a lover and who's a nemesis, and like how are these characters depicted, and like representation matters. Like I won't say like there's 3 white people running this company, but representation still matters. And we've tried to build a more diverse writing and art team to make sure that we're like putting that diversity in our game in a really authentic way.
I guess because we played last time at PAX South, that was January. Oh, that feels so long ago.
Years ago.
Yeah. Has there been any updates or anything that you all have added towards the game for like the final product that we did not get to see that you would like to talk about at all?
Ooh. Well, there's very boring stuff like just quality of life bug fixing in the app, but important stuff. And we've also integrated a few more adventures into the app, and we'll be continuing to do that as we roll out basically as we get ready for the Kickstarter. We're going to continue to add more content so that everyone who's playing the game, all our reviewers and previewers and other media folks, get to see some different stuff. Let's see. We've got some new lovers, some new captain stuff that we didn't get to really play with at PAX South. As well, we've been testing and playing with more of the new factions. So we've been playing a lot with the Atlanteans and with the British Empire. And so we're just trying to make sure all that stuff is going to be awesome for players to play when they actually get the game after launch.
Yeah, it's insane. So like even with all the stuff that we played, and we played on 2 different days, and I don't know if you felt this way, Matt, but it felt like different games in terms of like what was happening because we had more players, and it just seemed like the replayability was really there, even from I'm assuming after all the stuff you just mentioned, because we didn't see none of that cool stuff additionally. This game is going to have ridiculously replayability value, and if you're updating stuff in the app, it seems that we're going to get more and more stuff throughout. Was that like an intentional thing just to have like the max replayability so people just play this game to the end of time? Because that's what it seems like.
Yes.
I can't imagine any 2 games literally ever being the same. I don't know if we'll ever get to each adventure in each story. And I think this really comes down to like the app just being so huge, and like Matt said, not having to do like the choose your own adventure thing where we have to like flip back with pages. It's all on an app. And I'm just really excited for all the. I don't even really have a question. I just want to say how cool it is.
Well, thank you.
How much replayability is going to be in this game. I just wanted to stress that to our listeners. This game is going to be more. I think this might be replayed more in my circles than any other game we have. Really.
That is great to hear. I mean, that 100% is a goal of the game. Is we wanted it to feel different every time you played it. And so, yeah, a lot goes into that. So you guys got to see 2 of the total factions. And so we're hoping when the Kickstarter goes live and everything goes well that if we hit our all stretch goals, we're going to have 8 different factions that you can mix and match, plus all the other adventures for all the other characters. So you're looking at, like, we're cramming, like, this big 700-page book into the app, hoping that, you know, this is going to be a game that people can play for a long time. And if someone does exhaust it, then it's going to be a good sign because it means they played the heck out of it.
So I guess just to help, because I know Kate's going to eventually ask us, how many lovers do you all have right now as options?
You know me.
So right now you're looking at 8 in the base game. I think we're going to have another 8 as stretch goals.
Oh, wow.
I get to romance so many attractive people.
Double the amount of romance. Yes.
How many of them are soft boys?
Am
I using that right?
You are using that correct.
Works?
Let me Google that term really quick.
Just a very, very sensitive man. A very sensitive man who is not like... You know, there's like an E-boy, which is another turn, and then there's the F-boy, and then there's a soft boy who is just like all in his feels.
Why do we have these terms? I'm with Ryan.
Ask the internet. Okay. I'm sorry.
I only know what that term is because I follow Kate on
anime
Twitter.
Characters. I'm sorry. Like Alucard from Castlevania is a soft boy.
Okay, I'm understanding this archetype. Yes, I'm looking through Google Images. It is becoming clear. You know, I that's actually a good question. I'd say maybe you could expect at least one soft boy in the bunch.
I know that was a joke question, but that does bring in a really good question as for like character archetypings, both across pirates and romances and nemesis. How did you, do they all play completely differently? Is there a common trend between them? Like, did you archetype them out?
We did. Not necessarily whether they are soft boys, hard boys, or anywhere in between. But maybe we should have. There's still time. But no, so it goes back to like whether, regardless of like gender, basically there are 4 core archetypes around them. You know, if you're a thief type character, there are many different expressions of the thief. So the thief is motivated by the money, by stealing riches, by earning things in ways that are unsavory. But there's different kinds. So there might be more like, oh, well, I was formerly a trained assassin, and now I've turned to thieving. Or maybe I'm kind of a Robin Hood type character, and I'm all about stealing from the rich, given to the poor, who just happen to also help me elude the authorities. Or maybe you're a character like Magpie, who's just a little weird, and he's got lots of birds that he commands, and he likes stealing shiny things from people. So there's a lot of rooms for variation inside each archetype.
That's awesome. See, look, Adrian, your joke question about my soft boys turned into a great question.
Hey, that wasn't a joke question. That was like sate Kate up for an amazing question. See, we're a team.
It was a great question. No one's ever asked me that question, and so shame on everyone else.
I will say, when we review the game, I will do a list and break them down into their different boy types.
Oh, jeez.
That would be really useful. I have a feeling we could use a classification like that.
I just really like romancing, y'all.
Yeah, I know we talked a lot about the romancing, but I think one of the coolest features about this game is that it's one of those games, it's a game, I don't know any other game that's like this, like where you're competing against your your friends, but you're also competing against the NPCs. And at one point, you might have to come together to go against the NPCs. And it's just like really like balancing of one turn can kind of change everything. And one of the coolest balancing features is when the NPCs move, everyone gets a turn to kind of move the NPCs. So it's like a constant like, don't make anyone too mad or they might attack you, but also don't give the NPCs too much power. So what comes into that kind of just crazy dynamic of balancing all of that? Like, do you like chaos? That's what it feels like.
I mean, definitely. Like, I love the flow of the game between, PvP, everyone's out for themselves, to like, oh, suddenly it's PvE, and we're like, oh my gosh, if another port gets infested by the undead, like, we all lose. So that sort of like tug and sort of push and pull of alliances and makeshift alliances at that, to me, is really interesting in this idea of a game all about the freedom to be the pirate you want to be. Well, the rest of the world is moving and going on without you, and so that had a lot of appeal to us, and partially for the chaos, and then partially for the strategic factor of like, hey, do you want to like have everyone band together and try to figure out like what is the best possible move for all the NPCs to make? Should you have the merfolk go to war against the undead? Should you have the Spanish swoop in to help save a town that's being currently infested? I think those choices are all really interesting, especially if you're a player like me, though, who's pretty petty and will probably just use the NPCs to get revenge on the other players at the table, regardless of us all losing or not.
I don't know anybody like that.
No, who would ever play like that? I don't know.
I may have attacked Kate a bunch of times. Sorry, Kate. I'm just scared of you when we play board games together because you're really good. So I just try to kill you whenever we play games now.
I'm not really good. Matt's really good. I just mess it up for everybody once I realize I'm losing. I wouldn't qualify that as good. Yeah, I mean, so what can we expect? So when is the game launching? How can people follow it, get in on the Kickstarter, and what are some of the, I guess, your favorite goals when people donate?
Ooh, okay. So first of all, Sea of Legends will be hitting Kickstarter on April 7th. That's a Tuesday. And we're looking to launch between, I think, about 6 or 7 months, hopefully afterwards, to get that to everyone who's backed. Now, there are some complications, which we acknowledge in our Kickstarter because of COVID-19. So everyone should just be aware that actually has a really real effect on the games industry, as most games are, in fact, made in China.
Yep.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
like
just putting that out there, I think it's a real buzzkill.
Well, no. I mean, it is a really valid thing, and I don't think a lot of people aren't talking about like the small business impacts of it as well, and stuff like this. So, I mean, I think it is important. It just hit me how sad it is for games.
Mm-hmm.
You mean you're not sculpting these miniatures by hand, Ryan?
I don't think you want me to. But for all my insights about all our insights about the Kickstarter or other such implications, you can, by the way, find us at Guildhall Studios on Instagram, Guildhall Studios on Facebook, Guildhall Studio, no S, on Twitter because of the character limit. And we will be, our Kickstarter preview page is up if you want to actually click that button to be notified when it goes live. But those are all the places you can find us, get updates. We'll be keeping people abreast of everything going on as the Kickstarter is going on, and afterwards we'll be sending out updates. So we're gonna just communicate as it develops, and you're all part of this ride.
Awesome. I guess my last final thought is I will say thank you again for allowing us to play it twice. I enjoyed it. It was definitely an interesting thing because I just want to say that I had a conversation with somebody earlier that morning at PAX South because they had felt they were they're like, oh, I got stuck with a tabletop. I was like, oh, I always check things. I never get bamboozled into playing tabletops. And then I realized, oh, I've been bamboozled into playing tabletops. And then, so I was like, oh, it's debated. But no, then I went and played it, and I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was really enjoyable. And it was definitely I guess it was a very, I guess, unique tabletop experience, and I will say, just from a person who obviously, like I said, that's right, not to get bamboozled in tabletops, having that app aspect to like speed everything up, or just kind of make things simpler, and just obviously, I just like pirates in general. Why I was there. Some people do want to be a pirate. They don't mind if they have an eye patch; it's fine. But no, I just want to say like. Thank you again for, obviously allowing us to come back, but also, making this game, because I came away very impressed, and I have not done a single tabletop and like doing cons for like 2 years, and you were the first and the only one I've come back to at this point.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. Those are honestly, I'm like honored by those words. That's such like, I'm so glad we bamboozled you. I hope we can bamboozle more people. Tabletop games can be, intimidating, or they can be cumbersome sometimes, and but we just, I don't know, I love the experience. Like, I love video games, I love tabletop games, I love all games, but there's just something to me about coming around the table with your friends face to face to goof around over a board game that like just that's special to me. I guess that's why I do it. That just can't be recreated in any other medium.
That's awesome.
So we'll keep tricking people.
And I do want to like preface
in the most
this.
wholesome way.
When we went for the second time, it wasn't just we showed up for like a 30-minute appointment. It was we played until Ryan and Zach had to actually tell us, "Hey guys, we have to go to the airport, so we need to pack up now."
Yeah,
I think we got far enough where you were like, "Wait, we don't have that card yet." Mm-hmm. Slow down, people. Relax.
But thank you so much for sitting down to talk with us. I mean, I loved the game. Adrian, do you have any final thoughts or any last questions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have any real final thoughts. I think we kind of covered everything. I think if you want any more thoughts of that we had, I think that we might not have covered it. We all wrote a little write-up on butwhythopodcast.com that I think really kind of covers why this game is so cool and why it's so special. So I'm just really excited to play it again, with Matt and Kate, with like our other friends, and with my parents who are big into tabletop now. Like, I just want it. Can it be 6 months to 8 months from now already?
We'll also work on the time machine, I guess, or whatever. The good news is we are always slowly progressing through time.
I will say, if and I have to put an if because of the current state of things, but if PAX West happens and y'all are there, we will be spending at least one day playing games with you, because I really want to play this game again.
Awesome. We will absolutely, if PAX West exists, we will be around for it. Since it is in our backyard, there's no reason not for us to be there. And we'd love to play with you guys again, and we'll be sending you all a copy for your review to see what you think before or during the Kickstarter. I guess whenever that sort of timing works out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know you plugged where people can follow Guildhall, but do you want to let people know where they can find you?
Sure. Yes. If you like threads about books, selfies with cats, and occasional talk about games and other things, you can follow me at Ryan Schapals on Twitter. That's just RyanSchapals. So follow me there, but more importantly, check out all the stuff from Guildhall. And thank you all, Kate, Matt, Adrian. Really fun talking with you all about Sea of Legends. Like, I love the enthusiasm. I love that y'all are some of like the most experienced Sea of Legends players on the planet right now.
There we go. We are the top 1% Sea of Legends players.
Exactly.
We're killing it.
You were defining the metagame.